14.14 is a pretty pro-focused patch, as we have nerfs to Corki and Tristana, Warmogs is becoming weaker for supports, while Zed is actually receiving a pretty nice buff. And of course, Aurora will be released sometime this patch, but as always with any new champion, we'll be holding off on giving her a rating until our mid-patch tier list update, as it's really hard to pinpoint the exact strength of a new champion before we see them on live servers. Keep an eye out for our Aurora guide though, which will be going live this week. And did you know with a 55% win rate, it takes 150 games on average to go up just one rank? Increase your win rate by just 5%, and that time is cut in half to only 80 games. This is the power of SkillCapped. Each course offers a win rate increase that is just a click away. Learn what took Challenger players 10 years and just 10 minutes. We supercharge your rank gains with real results. Click the link in the description below now to get the rank you've always dreamed of. Starting things off by covering all the item and runes changes, there isn't a whole lot going on. Absorb Life is being targeted with a nerf to its early game sustain, but it's going to be buffed from level 13 onwards. We expect that many champs will go back to running either Triumph or Presence of Mind moving forward, as reducing the effectiveness of Absorb Life in the early game in exchange for a stronger late game should be a net nerf on the majority of champs. We've been covering how OP the Warmog's Rush has been for a while now, even before it really became super popular, and Riot finally has a nerf plan for 14.14. Warmog's Rush is going to become much weaker on supports for this patch, as the health required to activate its passive is going from 1300 to 1500. This now means you need at least a Kindle gem in order to activate the passive, which costs 800 gold and provides 200 health. So if you do still rush Warmogs, your big power spike is going to come a little bit later on. Warmogs as a second pickup is completely unaffected, as you're going to have enough bonus health from your first item to activate its passive. So for a non-support like Mundo, who has been liking Warmogs, he likely just prioritizes the Heartsteel Rush first and then goes into Warmogs second now. Supports are without question now weaker with Warmogs, but it's tough to say if this change will be enough to completely remove the item from meta. Moving on to the direct champion changes now, we've got 7 different top laners being adjusted for this patch. Cho'Gath is going to receive a really nice boost in damage to his E, as it's being increased from 82 to 100 at max rank. Keep in mind this is per auto attack, so if you're able to get all 3 autos off with Cho E, it's 54 added damage. For an ability on a 4-second cooldown at max rank that can be spammed in skirmishes, this buff will definitely add up. Q damage is also going up at max rank, but since you don't max the ability out until 2nd or 3rd, this change isn't as impactful as the E buff. Overall, these changes should put Cho'Gath in a really good spot for 14.14. He'll settle out in either an A or S tier position, but we're leaning more towards S for now, which is where he'll be placed on the tier list. Riot is going to be adding a tiny bit of damage to Jace's Q for next patch, as the base value is going up by 5 at all ranks, while the bonus AD ratio is up from 120 to 125%. Not anywhere near enough in our eyes to significantly shift Jace's solo Q strength, so he's going to remain in the top lane B tier. Another top lane tank is going to get a buff for this patch, as Sion will have his W damage increased. It's the target's max health damage that is going up from 10 scaling to 14% to just a flat 14% at all ranks. So likely not as impactful as the Cho'Gath buffs, and with how much Sion has struggled in recent patches, we don't see this being enough to alter his tier list placement. If Riot were to have increased the max health damage at max rank, then we'd probably have a different story, but the fact it stays the same and is only stronger early on in the game makes it less appealing. More of a quality of life buff than anything with this next one, as Teemo is going to be entering stealth a bit faster now. Riot has stated that it will be around 0.125 seconds faster than before, so it's nothing crazy, and we don't expect it to help move the needle in regards to Teemo's tier list placement. Jax has been excelling in the higher elos as of recent, so a nerf is headed his way. E cooldown is going up from 15 scaling to 9 seconds to 17 scaling to 9 seconds. So a bit of an early game nerf to Jax with this one, as the enemy will now have a slightly larger window in which they can look to punish you in lane, or just a longer window in which you will have to play more reserved. Jax has been on the fence between A and S tier in recent patches, so as a result of this nerf, we're going to be leaving him in the A tier. Rumble's Q damage is getting absolutely torched for this patch. The base damage on Q is dropping from 125 all the way down to 80 at rank 1. This means that for the first couple of levels in lane, the bully strength of Rumble becomes significantly weaker. The damage is only down by 5 once you have the spell fully maxed out, but losing 45 damage at rank 1 is just such a massive blow. We really don't see how Rumble doesn't lose a significant amount of power as a result of this nerf, so we're going to be moving him down into the top lane C tier. Next up, we've got a couple of adjustments to Aurelia. Passive attack speed is now going to scale linearly with each level instead of giving a boost at levels 7 and 13. AD per level is dropping from 4 to 3.5. With each point you put into Aurelia's R, you gain cooldown reduction for your Q, and that is being nerfed this patch at rank 2 and rank 3 of Aurelia's R. So the passive change should end up a buff at all stages of the game if our math is correct. However, the AD per level and R changes are obviously nerfs. It's tough to say exactly how much power Aurelia will gain or lose for next patch, so we're not going to be shifting her on the tier list for 14.14, as she'll remain in the B tier. So if we have a look at the complete top lane tier list, the upper echelon of the role really isn't affected this patch. A lot of the direct champion changes are pretty light, as it's really only the Cho'Gath buffs and the Rumble nerf that we think are overly impactful. Set and Volibear will continue to be rated as two of the most powerful solo queue carries. Even though Mundo won't be as strong this patch with the Warmog's Rush, he's actually been performing better in solo queue by going Heartsteel first into Warmog second, so because it's only the Warmog's Rush that is weaker, we don't really see Mundo losing very much power, especially if players just transition to rushing Heartsteel. Singed is another top laner who's been liking Warmogs as of recent, but he's been slotting the item in second or third, so he's not negatively affected by the nerf at all. Not a single jungle buff for this patch, as it's all junglers being targeted with nerfs, and first up is Bel'Veth. Attack range is dropping from 175 to 150, while her R bonus attack range is going up from 50 to 75. We don't see a lot of range nerfs like these, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly how much power Bel'Veth will be losing, and for now, we're going to keep her placed in the jungle A tier. Despite Kindred being a pretty mediocre champ for the majority of ranks, they've been excelling a ton in high elo, which is why Riot's nerfing them. Q attack speed will be dropping from 35 to 30%, and Q AD ratio is going down as well from 0.75 to 0.65. Kindred's going to be in and around that B to A tier level moving forward for the majority of ranks, and we'll be placing them in B tier for 14.14. Lilia has been the most OP jungler across most elo brackets in 14.13, so a nerf is finally headed her way. Healing is what's being targeted, as multi-champion healing is going down from 33 to 15%. Definitely significant, but likely not enough to completely remove Lilia from meta, so we'll only be dropping her from OP and into S for now. Much like Kindred, Nidalee is another one of those high elo skewed junglers who's going to be nerfed for 14.14. Cougar form W and E damage are both going to be nerfed, as W damage is dropping from 60 scaling to 210 to 55 scaling to 190. There will now be a 50% AD ratio on W damage though. E damage is being reduced by 10 at all ranks, while the AD ratio is going up from 40 to 70%. Nidalee's E is a bonus AD ratio, so we are going to assume that this AD ratio being added to W is also a bonus AD ratio. If this is the case, then it means that unless you're actually building AD, the addition of these AD ratios don't really matter that much. In other words, if you're playing the standard AP Nidalee, she's definitely getting weaker for this patch, as we'll be dropping her from A into B tier. For Diamond and above, Nidalee could still remain a pretty solid pick, but since our tier lists are more so catered towards what's best for the majority of ranks, Nidalee is placed lower down. Zyra Jungle has become quite popular over the past few patches, eclipsing around a 4% play rate in 14.13, but that likely falls off quite hard for 14.14. Plant damage is being reduced from 16 scaling to 84 to 15 scaling to 75. Monster bonus damage is dropping as well from 60 scaling to 100 to 50 scaling to 100. Even with Zyra becoming more popular as of recent, she hasn't really been performing all that well in solo queue, so with these nerfs being issued, we don't think the champ will be worth playing over the majority of junglers, and we'll be moving Zyra into the C tier to reflect that. We've got a bit of a power shift going on with Hecarim for this patch, as Riot has a bunch of minor changes planned. Health growth is being increased from 99 to 106. W duration is dropping from 5 to 4 seconds. Healing from W is up from 20 to 25%, while W cooldown is being lowered from 16 scaling to 14 seconds to a flat 14 seconds at all ranks. We've got a change to E as well, with the cooldown going from 18 seconds flat to now 20 scaling to 16 seconds. These look like pretty neutral changes on paper, so we're not going to be shifting Hecarim's tier list placement, as he'll remain in the B tier. So with Lilia dropping out of the OP tier for the first time in a while, we now have a new look, as Nocturne will be moving up and taking her place. Noc has been on the rise ever since the patch 14.10 jungle XP changes, and is currently one of the best junglers for Diamond and below. Udyr is another champ who really benefited from the 14.10 changes and is being moved up into the S tier for 14.14. These farming junglers like Nocturne, Udyr, Shyvana, and Fiddlesticks are all extremely powerful right now and are overshadowing a lot of the early game ganking junglers. If you're in the lower ranks right now, these kind of junglers being in really strong spots is great, as they are pretty easy to pilot but have very defined power spikes to play off of. With Fiddle, Shyvana, and Nocturne, it's all about playing off R cooldown, so there's just less overthinking that goes into playing them. On the flip side, with a more high elo skewed jungler like Nidalee, you don't really have that well-defined power spike to play off off of, and there's so many ways in which you can approach fights. This higher variance is great for the very top-ranked players with incredible macro knowledge, but for the average player, less is often more. Zed has now been in a bit of a weaker state for a while now, so he's going to receive a pretty meaningful buff this patch. Q damage is going up by 10 at all ranks, which is massive. E cooldown refund is going up as well from 2 to 3 seconds. Zed Q is only on a 6-second cooldown, so adding 10 bonus damage to a spell that you can reliably spam out in lane will make a big difference. We think these changes are enough to finally push Zed out of the mid lane B tier, as he's been there for all of Season 14 and will be moving up into A tier for 14.14. Now, despite Zed being more on the weaker side this season, his ban rate has still been upwards of 20%, so it will be interesting to see how much higher that ban rate spikes to this patch. So Zed is the only mid buff for this patch, as we've got nerfs from here on out, and Corki is first in line. Base health of Corki is going to be dropping from 640 to 610, so his already underwhelming early game becomes even weaker. Despite Corki being a prominent pick in Pro as of late, that same kind of success just hasn't translated into solo queue, as we've had him down in the mid lane C tier, and he's most certainly going to stay there with this nerf being issued. The second mid lane champ who's been very problematic in pro play as of late is Tristana, and she's being nerfed as well. Base mana is going up from 250 to 350. Q will now have a mana cost though, as it's going up from 0 to 50. W mana cost is being lowered from 60 to 50. So these are definitely net nerfs to Trist, as you won't be able to spam out Q super freely in lane anymore. Especially for solo queue, Trist mid is a champ that you want to be playing super aggressive with early on, and this nerf will really limit that moving forward. So we're going to be moving Tristana down the mid lane tier list, pushing her from S into A tier. There is a world where the nerf hits even harder and she falls into B tier, but we see A as the fit for now. Brand is being tagged with another round of nerfs, as nerfs that Riot issued in 14.13 were not enough to lower Brand's power as much as they had hoped. This time it's Brand E losing strength, as the damage is dropping from 60 scaling to 160 to 55 scaling to 155, while the cooldown of Brand E is going up by 1 second at all ranks. For a spell that is point and click and one that you can spam out off of cooldown in lane, especially in melee matchups, we do see this change being somewhat impactful. Brand should not completely disappear from meta, but his time as a top tier mid will be coming to an end, as we're dropping him into the mid lane A tier. Aurelion Sol is going to be adjusted for this patch, with some power being shifted around in his kit. Base AD will be going up from 55 to 58. Q initial mana cost is going to be increased, however the mana in which you will expend over the course of a fully channeled Q will be the same as before. The reason Riot's making this change is to try and eliminate the strength of just tapping Sol's Q for the Rylai's slow, while not punishing players that actually use the full duration of it. W range is going up quite significantly from 1200 units to now 1500, scaling to 1900 units. E mana cost will be lowered from 80 scaling to 100 to 80 flat. The AP ratio of R falling star damage is going up from 65 to 75%. R shockwave multiplier is going down though from 100 to 90% of falling star damage. So all in all, we don't see these changes drastically shifting Aurelion Sol's solo Q strength. With the tap Q being nerfed, it may affect Sol a little more in the higher elos where players take advantage of this more often, while for the lower ranks, we likely see that he's not affected as much. We won't be moving Aurelion Sol anywhere on the tier list, as he will remain in the A tier for 14.14. So for the mid lane tier list this patch, we have no adjustments to the OP tier, as Vex and Neferi will continue to be two of the most optimal mids. With Tristana losing priority for this patch, we likely see LeBlanc overtake her as the most popular solo queue mid. With Electrocute recently buffed in the early game, it's given good LeBlanc players even more snowball power in lane, and the champ is super strong if piloted well. We definitely recommend staying away from Corki for solo queue this patch, as he was already sitting around a 47% win rate in 14.13, and that's going to drop even lower as a result of his nerf. It's pretty likely that Zed is going to see a big surge in popularity this patch, so if you don't want to ban him, who can you use as a counter? Sylas is always a great choice, and is actually a really solid S tier pick in meta right now as well, so there's a lot of value to having Sylas in your champion pool. Vlad is a very good option as well, as his W does a great job at shutting down the burst power of Zed when he tries to use his R. It's a very light patch down in the bot lane, as we have a few champs receiving buffs, and first up is Aphelios. Aphelios will be receiving a damage boost to a bunch of his guns for this patch, as the AD ratio on Q is going up for his purple, white, and red guns, while the base damage is being increased for his purple and white guns. With how poor of a solo queue performer Aphelios has been as of recent, we don't see these changes being enough to push him back into meta, so he's going to remain down in the C tier. Smolder is next in line for a buff, as his Q damage will be increased by 5 at all ranks. Like Aphelios changes, we don't see this one significantly altering Smolder's solo Q strength, so B tier is where he will remain on the tier list. So the bot lane meta is going to be looking very similar to where it was last patch, as Jinx and Kai'Sa will continue to be the highest priority ADCs. Even though the Trist and Corki changes are more specifically aimed towards reducing their strength as mid laners, the changes do hurt both champs in the bot lane as well. Trist is being moved from A into B tier, while while Corki has been in the C tier already, so there isn't anywhere further for him to drop. So other than Jinx and Kai'Sa, Misfortune is another pick that you should be putting a lot more priority on now. With how easy the champ is to play and how strong she has become due to her recent buffs, everyone in Diamond and below should be playing MF if they want to climb. The new heavy AD crit build of Bloodthirster, Essence Reaver, and Infinity Edge hits like a truck and is so simple to play due to all the upfront damage it provides. There's just one support champion that Riot will be changing for this patch, and it's Melio. They're issuing a couple of changes that are aimed towards rewarding you more for expressing your skill on Melio. Passive damage is going down, and more significantly in the early game, as instead of dealing damage equal to 15% of your allies' AD, it will now be 7% at level 1. Q is getting buffed though, as the cooldown drops from 12 to 10 seconds, while the range is going up from 1,000 to 1,200 units. You're also going to receive a 50% mana refund on Q when you hit an enemy champion with it. W is buffed with its recast range going up from 700 to 3,000 units. And lastly, E shield will be nerfed with the base value dropping by 15 at all ranks, while the AP ratio is going up from 30 to 45%. So Riot's taking away a lot of the guaranteed power from Melio's kit with the passive and E nerfs, while giving him more strength on the skill expressive side of his kit being his Q. We think that for the average player, these likely land as net negative changes, but we'll have to see how they pan out on live servers. For now, we won't be moving Melio anywhere on the support tier list, as he will be placed in the A tier. So the Warmog's nerf is the only change that really affects the support meta for this patch, and we will be making a few changes as a result. OP tier is going to look a bit different, as we've moved both Braum and Leona down to the S tier while moving Poppy up into the OP tier. Poppy is someone who likes to build Warmogs right now, but a lot of players rush Deadmans and don't build Warmogs until second, so the nerfs to Warmogs don't really affect this build at all. Braum and Leona, on the other hand, have been so extremely powerful rushing the Warmogs, so with the item being weaker as a rush, we expect for them to be losing a decent amount of strength. It's not like Warmogs is going to be completely useless on supports now. You're just going to need more gold in order to activate its passive, so you won't have as quick of a mid-game spike. If we got back to before Warmogs was even in meta, Leona and Braum were both still really good solo queue champs, so the item just took a lot of melee supports to a more egregious level. Pretty much every melee support in the game has been running Warmogs anyway, so if anything, it's just all melee supports as a whole that will lose the same amount of power, which should give rise to an enchanter like Nami, who has already been a great pickup in recent patches. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So that's gonna wrap everything up for the 14.14 tier list update. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.